Hello, a very warm welcome back to all of you. Sister Denise and I have been spending the last few episodes covering chapter 4 quite extensively, and we now find ourselves at the end of chapter 4 where we're summing up what the message that Sri Krishna gives to Arjuna is, that is contained within the context of chapter 4. Sister Denise, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Great to see you again.
Thanks.
Sister Denise, I've left out a number of shlokas because you've answered the questions that I would have posed to you on them in previous chapters. I'd like to take you now to shloka 40, which reads, "The man who is ignorant and does not have faith, who is of a doubting nature, is destroyed. Neither this world nor that beyond, nor happiness is for him who doubts." How does faith play a part in one's understanding of renunciation, knowledge, karma, etc.?
The two elements, faith and doubt, are very important in spiritual practice because it's so subtle, it's so intangible that it's very easy to question your insights. Say, for example, you understand something very, very subtle. The problem is you can't hold it because your consciousness slips back down to the ordinary level. And when that happens, then it's very easy for doubt to come in. And so the trick is to keep one's consciousness at this very sensitive, acute, perceptive state, because when you can hold it for a longer period of time, you arrive at a kind of knowing. And when you understand something theoretically and you experience it internally, mentally, then you say, yes, I know that this is true. So it's not a blind faith, but it's a faith based on knowing. However, because it's so subtle, you lose it. So a person who's striving, there is this word tapasya, which can mean intense meditation, but it also has this connotation of striving. We have to really strive to keep our consciousness at that level that we want until it's able to hold and persist at that level. So if the yoga level goes down, or if the karma becomes ordinary or negative, then that will conspire to bring your level of consciousness down, and then you can doubt. Doubt also occurs under the influence of other people's opinion or circumstances which don't seem to validate what your subtle understanding has shown you. So, doubt is actually a big issue. And if you look at the world today, one of the main things that you find in people is low self-esteem, which corresponds to self-doubt. Because a person, and you've seen in some of the shlokas earlier, you have to really be focused on yourself and really honor yourself and realize how special you are, and at the same time be humble. At the same time, always keep yourself under God, not over God, and then move forward in that enlightened stage.
As I hear you speak, you specifically focus on keeping your consciousness high. How on earth do you pull that off in a world that conspires at every second to bring your consciousness down to not just where you are, but even lower?
Well, I think it's all to do with resistance, resilience. An analogy that may serve is the person who goes to the gym to develop muscles. You go there, you work on the machines, you develop specific muscles, and if you don't keep it up, they kind of get underdeveloped again. So I think it's very much to do with the practice. You have to keep it up. This is why there is the question of discipline. We're not just studying, we're also really making it part of life. And a spiritual practice is done in circumstances of adversity, and you just have to get used to that because that's the nature of the game. Anything that you wish to achieve excellence in. There will always be obstacles, resistance, this kind of drag that drags you back. And by resisting that resistance, you actually increase your personal strength.
The next verse reads, action does not bind him who has renounced action through yoga, whose doubt is cut away by knowledge, and who's possessed of the self. Now, whilst that is very poetic, it still needs to be read more than once to be understood, does it not?
I remember as part of my own practice, the question of coming into your power and staying in your power seemed to me to be very much aligned with what this shloka is talking about. You see, when you are really connected with yourself and you're not trying to connect with yourself, or you're not in opposition to yourself, you're really in your power. And then when you're in your power and you go into action or into any kind of battle of any type, you're going in there really powerful. And I think a very important part of yoga is to come into your power, stay in your power, be in your power, and then you're pretty much invincible. But the trick is to get there, and then another trick is to stay there.
Therefore, having cut away with your own sword of knowledge this doubt that proceeds from ignorance and abides in your heart, resort to yoga, stand up, Arjuna. This is the last verse in this chapter that has given us so much of food for thought. This is still Shri Krishna giving encouragement, giving advice to his friend and saying, this is what you need to do. It's interesting that the last verse specifically mentions sword of knowledge, resort to yoga. But in my mind, Sister Denise, it sums up the entire chapter in these two lines.
Yeah, I agree. Sword of knowledge refers to the sharp intellect. And you see, yoga is said to be the substance that creates sharpness on a sword. And you know, the sword is very symbolic in a number of traditions. The samurai has his sword, all the different goddesses of India that you worship during Navaratri, these goddesses always carry swords. The sword is the ability to distinguish between one idea and another idea, to cut the differentiating line between what's right and what's not right, what's true and what's not true. We have this expression, splitting hairs. You need a very sharp sword to split a hair. So when you've got this sharp intellect and you've got the power of yoga, then you go fight. Because you're equipped.
Sister Denise, I would now like to go through the entire chapter 4 so that we could summarize for our viewers the essence of what the lessons are in this chapter. 41 comes up again, verse 41 comes up again in my mind because it's fresh in our memory. The feeling that I get is that every line of this book, Sri Krishna is encouraging Arjuna, and he's not admonishing him, nor is he screaming at him, nor is he punishing him, but he's holding out his hand and says, this is what you need to do. Put your hand in mine and take what I'm giving you. It's very kind in that sense. Is this what Arjuna needs? And I ask this question, Sister Denise, because I'm thinking of humanity at this point. Is this what humanity needs to see and experience from God, the side of God?
The mental state of Arjuna in the face of being told you have to kill your relatives, he is still operating on the basis of compassion. And I think that the quality of compassion and wanting to be a right person, he wants to be a righteous man. This is his most important thing. He doesn't want to be a killer. That's not what it's about. And so I think that when God is also in that sensitivity to the compassion of Arjuna, he has to be soft. Because otherwise, you brutalize the student. And brutalizing someone means they lose contact with their conscience, with their heart, with their sensitivities. It's a complete waste of time, although that is how the military are prepared. But this is not that war only. It's a very, very subtle inner war where you have to be really strong, but you don't have to be brutish.
So it's not just what Sri Krishna is saying to Arjuna, it is how he's saying it that matters.
Both, definitely.
So Denise, the aim of the lessons contained in chapter 4 is to teach Arjuna and the reader to achieve what? Is it nirvana? Is it something more than that?
Part of what Arjuna has to be is an archer whose arrow reaches the mark, and it's a very, very fine-tuned thing. And here you have a lot of contrasts, a lot of paradoxes that are being spoken about. Knowledge, yoga, you have to act but not act. So you're really having to conduct yourself on this razor's edge between too much and too little. It has to be so right that it's almost something else, And one of the things that is different between Rajyoga, spiritual practice, and conventional morality is that conventional morality says, okay, well, you can err on the side of this side or that side. It's okay. In Raj Yoga, you can't err on any side, because erring would be erring. It would be wrong. And so I think this is very much a chapter which is wanting us to have the perfect balance, to get it right, and by describing it in manners that are so full of paradox and apparent contradiction, it causes the student of yoga to really have to get it exactly right.
What struck me about chapter 4 is the number of paradoxes that it contained. I'm specifically drawn to shloka 22, which reads, "Content with whatever comes to him, transcending the dualities." That is the phrase that struck me, transcending the dualities. In other words, pleasure, pain, etc., free from envy, constant in mind whether in success or in failure. Even though he acts, he is not bound. How do you understand this, Sister Denise? And specifically, how do you define transcending the dualities?
It is often said that the practice involves reaching a state of equanimity. So equanimity means that your spirit feels the same whether things are good or bad, positive or negative. There's equilibrium, which is that you're balanced in the face of the pairs of opposites. So the purpose of the pairs of opposites is to bring you into this fluctuation. And the symbol of the stable soul is a candle that's not moving. The slightest breath of air makes the candle flicker. And in the human consciousness, the slightest wavering of emotion causes the spirit to not be concentrated. So concentration means you're stable, steady, the flame is not moving, and you're connected with the Supreme Light. It's a very, very fine tuning. If your angle is not right, or if you're moving, you can't do it. So it's really about getting it right.
Sister Denise, what then does God expect Arjuna to do with his dark side?
Your dark side has to be managed. I think also one has to be fully accepting and fully neutral about it. You have a differentiation between conventional morality and pure spirituality. See, pure spirituality says you have to be steady. Conventional morality says you have to be good. It's different. Being good means don't be bad. Anytime you say don't to the mind, it'll do it. Because the mind doesn't know the difference between do or don't.
There are very few people who know that.
Well, here we are, now we know.
Okay, you got that? Yes. Say that again, Sister Denise.
Well, I'll give you a little example. If you ask a person, think about a green apple, up pops a green apple. Tell the person, don't think about a green apple, up pops a green apple. There's no difference. The mind doesn't differentiate between yes or no, do it or don't do it. The intellect does that.
Yeah, by the same token, the mind cannot differentiate between imagination and reality, can it?
Well, the intellect has to do that. So the intellect is very important, but the intellect can't experience anything. And the mind, you see. So, with the intellect, you create the structure, you create the direction, you make the road, and the mind travels the road.
Okay, Sister Denise, there are millions of people watching you right now all across the globe who are deeply interested in that which is contained in the scripture, who have nothing but respect for it, who want to be what is contained in here. But the lifestyle that is prescribed in this book is of such a nature. Can one lead a normal life and do what is said here? Can you marry, have children, be ambitious, study, become a professional, acquire the house of your dreams, the car of your dreams, live the life of your dreams, and do what is said here? Or do you have to leave the world and live a life that's totally dedicated to this?
I think what you have to do is ask yourself this question, what do you want? Because if you have a house of your dreams, then you're going to have yoga with a house.
That is true.
So if you want this, then there's a price tag. And the price is, basically you can't have your cake and eat it. So you are in a situation, whatever your situation is. You may be married, you may be in a professionally very demanding situation, you may be very successful, all sorts of things. This is your circumstances. It doesn't really matter what your circumstances are, good, bad, or indifferent. In any circumstance, you decide to develop yourself spiritually and embark upon the path of Raj Yoga. Anyway, it's basically a lifelong thing. And as you carry on through your life, you grow, you change, things change, everything changes, and your relationship with the practice also changes, you see. So it has to be dynamic, it has to be living, it has to be constantly, a relationship. And a relationship has to be renegotiated every time the circumstances change, which they do all the time. So then you go back to yourself and ask yourself, okay, what do you want? To have wisdom, to live with God, to operate as a Raj Rishi like Janak. Again, I refer to King Janak, who had all the things, and still he was considered a sage, and I think that is really what Raj Yoga is telling us. Don't run away from the world physically, because it's going to come with you mentally, so there's no point.
My question, leading on from what you just said, is how does one maintain a healthy balance? Because just as it is very easy to fall into materialism fully and be ignorant of karma and therefore create bad karma, of which materialism is a part of it, but not the whole of it. And one can also do all of this that is contained in this chapter fully, and also be too extreme. How does one maintain a balance?
Well, if you look at the instructions of the Gita, it's at every step talking about balance. So the whole thing about it is you have to be balanced. You have to have a balance of knowledge and yoga. You have to balance being and doing. So you can't be an extreme balanced person.
No, you can't.
It's when you're away from balance that you get out of balance. So what this is a whole system to bring you into balance. Now, if you interpret it in such a way that you pull yourself out of balance and refuse to see what you're doing, then that's delusion. So then you're not doing Raj Yoga, you've fallen into a delusion. This is all about balance, and it will also give you a perspective on what your circumstances are and how you should manage them in order to be the perfect Raj Rishi.
So Denise, what comes to mind reading through this chapter and other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita is that the standard set by God for Arjuna is exceptionally high. I mean, it's as high can be. God is basically saying, become equal to me. The sincere effort maker will read this and think, I want to practice this today. I want to be neutral. I want to be compassionate. I want to have courage. I want to not be a coward. And then gets hit by the ceiling of his own limitations, be it mental, emotional, relationship-wise, etc. How do you protect yourself from being disheartened? Because it's something very real that any sincere effort maker faces. You want to be the gap. You're aware of the gap, Sister Denise,
Yeah.
because you're aware of the gap between the person that you want to be and what you are. You see, as far as I understand, the Bhagavad Gita can create your conscience. Okay? And it says, this is what you should be. And yet you're aware of the difference. How do you help yourself?
I think what the Gita is saying, hold yourself in this state of balance, aim exceptionally high, and then when you find that you aren't able to be there because of your weaknesses or whatever, then you have to deal with your disheartenment. Because the message of the Gita is, if disheartenment is a negative emotion, on the other side is the feeling of achievement, well, you have to be neutral about these two. So disheartenment is just one side of the balance. And then if you want to protect yourself from it, it means you don't want to really be a Raj Yogi. You want to have your cake and eat it. You don't want to deal with the negative.
How does one go about doing that? Dealing with the negative, your own dark side. How do you face it head on?
Well, you see, disheartenment is weakness. And then the Gita will say, well, be strong. Get through it. Don't give up. Stand up and fight. Get on with it. Do not be distracted by your experience that you're not up to what your ego says, oh, I am this. Well, reality comes in and says, well, no, you're not. And then God comes along and says, make yourself so. And you say, how? And he will say, do it. Just do it. The famous slogan. It's a good one.
It's a good one. Okay, that was a good one, Sister Denise. Thank you. We'll have to say goodbye to you right now. So, any last words to the viewer about chapter 4?
What we're seeing here is don't give up, keep going, just put one foot in front of the other. You're worth it, do it, show yourself, stretch yourself, show yourself what you can be, and don't allow yourself to give up too soon.
There you have it. Sister Denise has painted a picture for us of what God expects of us in chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita. And as you see, Sister Denise does not look at the world through rose-tinted spectacles. So we ask ourselves, what does God expect of us? And also, how do we live up to that expectation? And the tone of chapter 4 is God being very encouraging towards Arjuna, and therefore to us, to say, this is what you need to be, and I am here supporting you, and please become it. The words are very deep, very wise, and it's something that we can all look at in terms of our own character development. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sister Denise. And we look forward to seeing you and our speaker on the next episode, which covers chapter 5. Take care and goodbye.